The population of an area includes persons of various ages. The age composition of a population, sometimes called as age structure or age distribution, is one of the most basic characteristics of a population. One cannot proceed very far in the study of population growth or migration without an examination of age composition. The age composition is important for understanding the natality and mortality of a community. Age differences may create social and economic differences. Determinants of age structure. The age structure of a population is determined basically by three factors: fertility, mortality, and migration. Clark rightly points out that these three determinants of age structure are interdependent, and any change in one of these may influence the other two, and it is through these variables that the socio-economic conditions influence the age structure. It is fertility rate that determines the proportion of population in different age categories. That is why the countries of Latin America, Africa, and Asia, which are characterized by high birth rates, display large proportions in young age groups. Since the longevity of life in these countries is also short, the proportion of population in old age groups is also not very large. In most of the countries of these continents, about 2/5 of population is below 15 years of age. By contrast, the countries with low fertility rate and with long expectation of life have about 1/4 of their populations in the young age groups. But the proportion of population in the older age groups in these countries is relatively large. Thus, most of the countries of Europe and North America, which have completed their demographic transition, have an age composition where the proportion of young population is low and that of the old population is high. A continuous downward trend in fertility contributes to the increase in the proportion of population in older ages. Such has been the case with United States, Northwestern European countries, and the CIS countries, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. The impact of migration upon the age composition of a population can be analyzed in a similar way, but the specific impact of migration on age distribution is very much different from that of fertility and mortality, because the migrants have their own typical age pattern as well as natural increase pattern. As the migrants tend to be relatively younger and possessing high rate of natural increase, their usual short-term impact is the decline in the proportion of older adults and the aged population. This youthful effect continues if the volume of migration is maintained. The youthful effect will tend to decline, however, if the volume of migration tapers off or the new migrants happen to be of older ages. Thus, the impact of migration upon age structure is largely because of the fact that migration tends to be age selective. As people in working age group of 15 to 30 are more mobile than the people in the younger age groups, the age structure of the two areas involved in the process gets modified significantly. These basic factors of fertility, mortality, and migration apart, the age structure of a population is also influenced significantly by wars, which are highly male selective in their causality, catastrophe, natural calamities, population policies, etc. The impact of wars is most pronounced on the age distribution, as these take a heavy toll of young males. Aspects of individuals or communities' life, social attitudes, economic activities, political propensities, and so on are affected by age. Age influences the needs, thinking, attitude, and behavior of people. The age structure very much influences the socio-economic life of a nation. Age data are functional to those responsible for regional planning, different types of activities. Age data are also required for employment, marriage, retirement, and a number of other social and economic activities of life. The age structure enables us to determine the proportion of the labor force in the total population. It is helpful in finding out the dependency load. It indicates the approximate number of people who are attaining working age and retirement. Thus, an estimate may be made of the net addition to the working force for which new jobs are to be created. The relative proportion of producers and consumers will determine the capacity of a community to save and invest. Consumption and production also depends to a significant extent on the age structure. When the dependency load is very high, there is a severe pressure on the working population. This requires heavy demographic investment, which is mainly unproductive in nature. For understanding the future growth of population, it is necessary to know the age structure because it affects marriage rate and reproductive performance of the population. Thus, on the basis of age structure, it is possible to know whether a country has a progressive or regressive type of population. The study of age structure also helps us in knowing the number of old persons for whom old age pensions may have to be provided by the state. Age pyramids. One of the most commonly used method of analyzing the age composition is the age pyramid, which more is commonly known as age and sex pyramid. The age pyramids are constructed for depicting the age structure of a population along their vertical axis. In such pyramids, age groups at a regular interval, say 5 years, starting from 0 to 5 and ending according to the age structure of population under review are normally displayed. The age pyramids, often known as age and sex pyramids, constitute the most commonly used method for age composition analysis. Such pyramids are constructed in 3 ways. The vertical axis is graduated to represent age groups at a regular interval, normally 5 years, starting from 0 to 5 and ending anywhere depending upon the age structure of the population under review. The horizontal axis represents the percentage of males and females in a particular age group to the total males and females. Normally, the males are kept to the left and females to the right side of the vertical axis. Similar pyramids are also drawn by representing uniform age groups along vertical axis as in former case and proportion of population in a specific age group along the horizontal axis without separating males and females. Age pyramids are also constructed by representing actual population numbers along the horizontal axis instead of percentages. In such cases, males and females may or may not be separated. Age groups. The population geographers have devised another method of analyzing age structure, that is age groups, with a view to overcoming the above mentioned handicap of age pyramids. The categorization of population into various age groups permits regional comparisons with the help of choropleth maps. Generally, the population is categorized into 3 broad age groups. 1. The young, second one the adults, and the third one the old. Although there are no standardized breakpoints, yet the breaks at 15 years and 60 years are the most commonly used. Thus, the three broad age groups that emerge are 0 to 14, 15 to 59, and 60 and above. Young age group. This group includes young people of 0 to 9 or 0 to 14 years of age. This group is already non-reproductive and is increasingly non-productive. It is an expensive segment, for it must be fed, clothed, housed and educated. Besides, an abundance of young lives also assures a suffocatingly high birth rate in the near future. The youthful group is proportionately large in economically less advanced countries of the world where the birth rate is high. The proportion of children, sometimes called juvenility, is below 1/4 in part of Western Europe due to low fertility, and thus contrasts greatly with some countries of Africa, Latin America and Southeast Asia, where over half of the population may be under 15 years. B. The aged group are 60 to 65 years or over. In this group, there is usually a strong majority of females and widows who are mostly non-productive. The aged group is proportionately larger in the economically more advanced countries where the young group shrinks. C. The adult group are 15 to 59 years. This group is economically most productive, biologically most reproductive, and supports the bulk of the other two groups. This is also the most mobile age group. The proportion of aged to the total population tends to increase as the population evolves. The proportion of a population grouped as adult varies from one country to another, but generally the proportions are highest in the advanced countries and lowest in underdeveloped ones. Age indices. Another method of studying age composition is the calculation of age indices. A clear picture of the relationship of the three age groups may sometimes be gained by calculating and mapping age indices. Age indices can be represented cartographically on a map. This can help population geographers to make reasonable comparison of age structure. The term aging population lacks precision. Does it mean a larger proportion of aged persons or a smaller proportion of younger persons? It has been suggested that the former trend should be termed aging at the apex and the latter aging at the base. In economically advanced countries with low fertility, both of these trends have been apparent. And as countries with high fertility and declining mortality have a remarkably stable age structure, it must be inferred that the changes in fertility have played a more important role in aging than have changes in mortality. One reason perhaps is that the decline in mortality in underdeveloped countries has initially affected only the younger age groups, without any accompanying decline in fertility, and consequently there is rejuvenation at the base but no change at the apex. However, mortality and fertility are independent only to a certain extent. Mortality cannot decline indefinitely without affecting fertility at some point through a reduction in the size of families, because of the heavy burden of children on the remainder of the population. In advanced countries, mortality has reached very low levels among the lower age groups, and as further medical progress will undoubtedly reduce the afflictions of adult life and old age. One can reasonably assume continued increase in the number of old people. It is true that these countries have experienced a slowing down of cessation in the decline of fertility or even some revival, and that this will cause some reduction in aging. But the effects of major decline in fertility are still with us. The social and economic implications of aging are widespread. We have caused some alarm. We should not forget that demographic aging is the sum of the individual aging, which occur at different rates in different people. The economic activity of the population is only one aspect of the effects of aging. Consumption also changes with aging. Requirements of foodstuffs, housing, schools, hospitals, transport, pensions, and so on. A primary demographic consequence of fertility decline, especially if combined with increase in the life expectancy, is population aging. In 1950, just over 5% of the world population was aged 65 and over. By 2005, that proportion had risen to more than 7%, and it is expected to more than double over the next 45 years, reaching 16.1% in 2050. Globally, the number of persons aged 65 and over will more than triple in size, increasing from 476 million in 2005 to almost 1.5 billion by 2050. The sharpest increases in the proportion of population aged 65 and over are expected to take place in Latin America and Caribbean and in Asia, with percentages rising from 6% in 2005 to 18% in 2050 in both cases. This differential are even more pronounced. In 2005, 11 countries were estimated to have a median age above 40 years, all of them belonging to the more developed regions. Among the 10 countries with the oldest populations in the world in 2005, all are in European continent except for Japan, which has the highest estimated median age of 42.9 years. Differential age structure. So far, we have confined our attention to the age structure of countries, but of course, there are great differences in age structure within the countries, especially those which are heterogeneous ethnically, economically, and socially. Ethnic groups with different degrees of economic and social developments have different demographic habits and accordingly different age structures. The European and Maori populations of New Zealand form an excellent example. Although the Maoris now constitute only 8% of the total population, they are of a very youthful people, and this proportion is growing annually. Age composition of rural and urban populations usually differ considerably due to not only to different fertility and mortality trends, but also to the effects of migrations. In most western countries, at least, fertility tends to be lower in towns, and consequently urban populations have fewer children than rural populations. Until recently, mortality has also been much lower in the country than in the towns, and therefore rural populations have tended to have more old people than in towns. Migrations to and from towns continually modify their age structure because they mainly involve young adults whose loss to rural areas increases the proportion of old people, and eventually reduces the number of children. This situation is sometimes aggravated by a movement of old people from the town to the country on retirement. The general effects of all these tendencies can be seen in which shows the remarkable changes in age structure and sex structures of rural districts in England and Wales between 1911 and 1951. Franklin constructed a whole series of such diagrams to demonstrate the diverse age structures of communities in the North Islands of New Zealand. In African, Asian and Latin American towns, the proportion of young adults is especially high, causing unbalanced population structure. In the year 1980, the median age for the world population was estimated to be 22.4 years. The more developed regions had a longer period of aging than the less developed regions. Consequently, the median age for more developed regions was 31.4 years, while the median age for less developed regions lagged far behind as it was only 19.8 years. When the proportion of older population increases, the population is said to be aging. This results from decline in fertility, which reduces the proportion of young. The more developed regions have been experiencing this process since long, but it has just begun in less developed countries. In less developed countries, there are higher percentages of people over 40 years of age. In most of the Western, Central and Mediterranean countries of Europe, the percentage of children in the total population is small. The same is also the case with Japan, Australia and Argentina. The United Nations, USSR, Canada and New Zealand occupy an intermediate position in which children from 30 to 39% of the population. A small proportion of old people is generally found in less developed countries. In Western and Central Europe, the percentage of old people is more than 10%. The percentage of old people is between 5 to 9% in countries like Anglo-America, USSR, New Zealand, Japan, Argentina, Australia and Mediterranean Europe. In 2005, the more developed regions, least developed countries and the other less developed countries present the distinctive age profiles. The more developed regions show much higher proportions of older persons than the two groups of the countries from the less developed regions. Furthermore, the percentage of people aged 65 and over is expected to increase in more developed regions, rising from 15.3% in the year 2005. The old age dependency ratio is expected to increase even more rapidly in the other less developed countries, more than doubling from 9.1% in 2005 to 26.2% in 2050. Because many of the world's most populous nations are in the other less developed countries category, such percentage changes imply large changes in absolute numbers of the older persons. Age structure of India. According to the latest figures, 29.7% of the population is in the age group of 0 to 14 years, out of which 187.45 millions are males and 165.41 millions are females. The age group of 15 to 64 years shares 64.9% of the total population. In this group, there are 397.75 million males and 372.71 million females. Percentage of old age people, that is above 65 years, is 5.5 in which 30.83 million males and 33.99 million are females.